For generations, this system worked as intended. A check on royal power, used rarely and only in the gravest circumstances. But a system built to restrain one man's ambition assumes that the men restraining him have none of their own. In 1754, that assumption was tested and broken. In 1754, a man named Gaa was named Bashorun of Oyo, descendant of the earlier Bashorun Gaa, and by every account that survives him, a man feared for his physical strength as much as his political cunning. As head of the Oyo Mesi, he now stood at the exact point where the empire's system of checks and balances concentrated the most power in a single pair of hands. It did not take long for Gaa to show what he intended to do with it. Alaafin Labisi sat on Oyo's throne when Gaa rose to power. Soon after, Gaa had two of the Alaafin's closest friends murdered. There was no war behind it, no rival claim to the throne, simply a demonstration of what the new Bashorun was capable of and what the king could not stop him from doing. Grief-stricken and humiliated, Labisi took his own life. One king, gone, and Gaa's grip on Oyo had barely begun. Awan Bioju succeeded Labisi in 1750. His reign lasted 130 days before Gaa had him put to death directly. Agbaluaje came next, and for a time survived because he chose to cooperate with Gaa rather than resist him, but cooperation bought him nothing in the end. Like the Alaafins before him, Agbaluaje eventually lost his life to Gaa's treachery as well. Then came Majogbe, who understood exactly what he was facing. By this point, Gaa's own sons had grown as dangerous as their father, seizing tribute for themselves, ruling as cruelly as the Bashorun who had raised them. Majogbe tried to fight back the only way he safely could, quietly. Before his death, he managed to poison Gaa, a wound that left the once formidable Bashorun partially paralyzed. It wasn't enough to save him. Majogbe died in frustration, the third, by some accounts the fourth Alaafin to fall under Gaa's shadow. 3 kings, dead or destroyed in the span of roughly 2 decades. A fourth waited to take the throne. Whether he would suffer the same fate depended entirely on what he was willing to do differently. In 1774, Abiodun became Alaafin of Oyo. He inherited a Bashorun who was, by this point, physically weakened by Majogbe's poison. But Gaa's fear factor still ran deep through Oyo Ile. Abiodun understood immediately that surviving his reign meant doing what none of his predecessors had managed, destroying Gaa before Gaa destroyed him. He did not move quickly, and he did not move openly. The breaking point came through personal tragedy. Gaa, it said, was in need of a deer, Agbonren, in Yoruba, for a ritual purpose, and when none could be found, he ordered his men to kill a substitute bearing a similar-sounding name. That substitute was Agbonian, Alaafin Abiodun's own daughter, who by some accounts had been forcefully married into Gaa's household. For Abiodun, this was no longer a matter of political survival. It was personal, and it was unforgivable. Abiodun moved in secret. He put out word that he was gravely ill, a lie meant to lower Gaa's guard, and then, disguised as a commoner, slipped out to rally allies who had their own reasons to want Gaa gone: the Onikoyi, a powerful regional chief, and Oyabi, the Ona Kakanfo, the supreme commander of Oyo's imperial army, based in Ejase. It was an extraordinary step. For the first time in Oyo's history, the Ona Kakanfo marched his troops directly into the capital itself, not to defend the throne from a foreign enemy, but to end the reign of terror of the empire's own chief minister. By 1774, Gaa's paralysis had visibly weakened both his strength and his aura of invincibility. Abiodun and his allies moved to shatter what remained of it. A crowd of Oyo Ile's own citizens, stoked by years of fear and now finally given permission to act on their resentment, stormed Gaa's compound. His household was killed with almost no resistance from his remaining men. Only his eldest son, Ojo Agbaje, managed to escape, fleeing to the distant Bariba region to the north. Gaa himself was dragged out alive. What happened next took place in the heart of the city he had once controlled, at Akasan Market, the same great marketplace that had fed Oyo's wealth for generations, now the site of its most brutal public reckoning. Gaa was bound to a stake, and Alaafin Abiodun ordered that every citizen who had suffered under him be given the chance to cut a piece of flesh from his body, each piece cast into a fire lit before his own eyes. Deliberately, his nose and part of his chest were left untouched, a calculated cruelty meant to prolong the ordeal rather than end it quickly. When it was over, his remains were burned completely to ash. Yoruba tradition held that only total incineration could prevent a man like Gaa from returning. Out of his death came a saying that would outlive him by centuries in Yoruba culture, a warning to anyone who held power without restraint: remember the death of Gaa, and choose the truth instead. Bashorun Gaa was gone. 4 Alaafins had died under his shadow, some by his direct order, some driven to take their own lives rather than continue living under his control. The system that was supposed to check royal power had itself become an instrument of tyranny, wielded not by a king, but by the very council built to restrain one. Abiodun's reign that followed brought a measure of peace. Freed from the fear that had gripped Oyo Empire for 2 decades, he turned the empire's focus toward economic growth, deepening trade with European merchants on the coast, expanding the wealth that had made Oyo Empire one of the great cities of West Africa. But peace came with a hidden cost. So focused was Abiodun on economic policy that the military machine that had built the empire, the cavalry force that had broken Dahomey 4 times in 4 years, was allowed to weaken. Fewer campaigns, less investment in the army that had once made Oyo untouchable, and an empire that depended on the fear its cavalry inspired in tributary states could not afford that kind of quiet decline for long. Gaa was dead, burned to ash in the market he once ruled through fear. But the damage his reign had done could not be undone by his execution alone. Oyo's throne had been shown in the clearest possible terms that it could be broken from within. Not by a rival empire, not by a foreign invader, but by the very men entrusted to keep the king in check. The empire that had conquered Dahomey, that commanded cavalry no rival could outrun, now carried a wound that no army could heal. That wound was about to be tested, not by a chief minister this time, but by a general the empire itself had trusted, in a city called Ilorin, where the next chapter of Oyo's unraveling would begin.